Good morning, everyone. Am I wired? I'm on. I am. So good morning, everyone, and thanks for your time this morning. Thanks to Rikus and Ed for two really great presentations. So my job is to try and contextualize what the fluffy stuff of the Queen moving from a plug-in switchboard to a mobile phone into the reality of how we can use this technology to really change the way we work and change our business. So the whole theme of this event is digital transformation and living in this two-speed world. So I think it's worth just exploring what digital transformation means. And when you look at this slide, it's talking about using technology to change the way we work. So that's operational efficiencies, generating new revenue streams, making work a place of where you are as opposed to where you work. So both Rikus and Ed verbalized in many different ways this morning how work is where you are at a given moment in time, and it's no longer this tied to a desk or tied to a specific environment. It's about being able to perform any task that you need at any time from the location that you have to be. And the beauty of it is it does give us the freedom to be more efficient, but also adapt our lives and work around with our families to mean with work is not such an abstractive thing where you start at 8 and you end at 5. You could choose your working hours to suit what your family or your personal requirements are, as well as fulfilling your business objectives. And then lastly, it's about customer experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about the whole contact center space and how we interact with customers. But CX, as it's termed in the industry, is really key in delivering on a whole bunch of these things, specifically new revenue and new opportunities. A couple of interesting statistics. So we're talking about digital transformation. What happens if you don't embrace this technology and this transformation? So if I share a couple of interesting stats. In 1922, a company that was in the Standard & Poor's 500 would expect to be in that position for at least the next 67 years. Today, that time frame is 15 years. So it illustrates how by not adapting, doing the same things that you've been doing for years and years, you can't do that any longer. The evolution of the business is essential to succeeding and the continued growth of any business. The other good stat or interesting one is if you were in 1955, 80% of the Fortune 500 companies that were Fortune 500 in 1955, they no longer exist. Again, hell of a scary stat. So this is not should I or shouldn't I, this is if I don't, we probably won't be around anymore. And if you think of examples like Kodak, who were absolutely dominant in the photographic industry and no longer exist. And when I started at Mitel 15 years ago, and I looked at my LinkedIn, someone sent me a message on LinkedIn, congrats on 15 years. It's gone past so quickly, and you get less for murder, frankly, but... So the point is, so 15 years ago, Mitel were I was probably one of the first BlackBerry users in the country, that blue BlackBerry with a belt clip. Today, that technology is completely dead. It was revolutionary at that time, but they missed the next wave and the next wave and the next wave, and today they're a big player in this. So there was one other point I just wanted to make. So in the 15 years that I've been in this industry, business communication has transformed beyond belief. So we've gone from pretty much dial tone-based communication tools to something that is absolutely a productivity tool and can really make a difference in the way we work and the way we deliver on our business objectives. And UC is very much part of this digital transformation, probably one of the cornerstones of it. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about this morning. So some of the stuff I'm touching on here has been well documented by both Ed and Rikus. So we understand that millennials are driving this and that the mobile device is the most critical device to all of us in both our personal lives as well as in our business life. If you think of, so UC is not new. Rick has verbalized that, been around 10 years, maybe 8 years in the early adoption phase. But I'd say it's been mainstream in the last 4 or 5 years. But that adoption rate has tended to be focused on parts of organizations. So it might be knowledge workers, power workers. We all know that in organizations, we tend to have people with various different levels of PC literacy. So that was one of the major stumbling blocks on UC adoption, that if someone's not comfortable with the PC on their desk and just about gets around Outlook, Word, etc., giving them another application is actually scary. It's not an embracing thing. But because the workforce is changing, there's a lot of new blood coming in, the mobile phone is pervasive and is being used by younger and older people alike. The adoption of UC is going to be a lot greater. So we have the opportunity now where we can proliferate UC throughout the organization, and that's where the real benefit comes in. So if only a subset are using certain functions, it's not going to be as dramatic an impact to the business as if you could proliferate it throughout. And you still may have some people only using sections of the UC stack and some other people using it more pervasively. But the truth is the whole organization is connected and anyone can see what anyone else's status and availability is at any given moment in time. So from a strategic point of view, the people in this room, be you working for EOH or a partner and selling these solutions into the market, or enterprise or public sector customers that are looking at a strategy on how to deploy this technology, we need to really marry three things together. You've got to take your enterprise communication strategy as it sits today. You've got to look at how you integrate the mobile piece into that, and then what is the future of cloud? So cloud is a big word. Every part of the ICT industry has a cloud play of some form or another. For the purposes of this discussion this morning, we're really talking about UC as a potential cloud-based service. And if you look at someone like BMI, they currently see cloud voice or cloud UC as being roughly 10% of the overall voice spend of the national spend, annual spend on voice. That's going to evolve and get larger and larger. And the models could be that you move your premise-based solution fully to the cloud. There could be some hybrid deployments depending on the requirements, but certainly cloud should be part of the overall strategy. The connectivity solutions we now have at our disposal are very, very much cloud enablement technologies, and overall that will allow us to evolve to the cloud at your pace. So within the Mitel world, we like to try and get our customers to understand that we will give them the best path to the cloud at their pace. So if you take all of these things together, we really need to marry them into one seamless strategy. And the underlying architecture or technology that allows this to happen is IP. Excuse me. So IP is the thing that makes this happen. And it's done it on both sides of the coin. So if we look in the traditional voice communication world, going back 15 years, TDM was still the prevailing technology, and we evolved to IP. And in 15 years ago, IP was perceived as being something of the future, and people were debating whether a real-time application like voice could honestly run on an IP network. Today, we don't have those discussions. It's a given. So that level of convergence has happened, and going into data centers and clouds is another level of convergence. It also brings us into the world of looking at consumption-based model as opposed to a CapEx model. And again, there's no right and wrong answer. For you in the room, you need to be thinking about what is your strategy for technology investment. Do you see this as a 3-year, a 5-year, a 10-year investment? And those types of decisions, discussions and outcomes will dictate whether OpEx or CapEx makes better sense. But all of these options are now available to us. Of course, on the mobile front, starting with the Nokia 2010, some 20 years ago, and today the technology we have in our handheld device, it's a completely different world. 4G and LTE have allowed that data ramp that Ed showed you to really kick in, because the speeds and feeds are there. And 5G is going to take it a step further. Because what 5G allows us to do is really use mobile operators as bandwidth providers. You can slice and dice the spectrum and start essentially building your own private mobile networks where the mobile operator is providing you with reach, and the service level could be something they're providing, or it could be a completely third party that's overlaying a service on top of their infrastructure. Just as we've been doing for years, putting our own services on top of like a DigiNet or a fiber-based infrastructure. So what is UC about? And I'm not going to go through this slide in great detail, but it's essentially your window to the world. So this new world that we're talking about, the UC applications, be they PC-based, tablet-based, or mobile phone-based, they all are there to allow this ease of working, ease of communication, and understanding when you are available and when you're not. So it could be location-based communication. When I'm at home, my mobile device, which is a business device too, no longer acts as a business device because my location is understood as I'm at home. When I leave home and I'm on my way to the office or my first meeting for the day, this business tool becomes a business tool again. So, one of the scary things of this is that you feel that you're never out of contact. You can still control your accessibility though. So if there's a time when you want to just be away from the office, it is in your hands and under your control. So Rick spoke about team collaboration. We call this persistent chat. And really what it's about is, you could look at it as a WhatsApp on steroids. It's a group communication that is designed for businesses where they have teams that have to be collaborative. And they could collaborate across time zones, across geographic boundaries. And really what this is doing is you're creating a stream, you're adding members to that stream who are participating in that particular function, and allowing them to communicate in real time. So you have a complete A to Z of what this communication stream was. Let's assume it was a project. So within a project, the members that are within that project will have access to exactly the same information. We're not pinging emails around with lots of attachments. It's all sitting in this single stream. All the project documentation, et cetera, would be part of that. So you're fulfilling a compliance obligation too, because this information is stored in the cloud. So you have access to it and can be audited and vetted at any given moment in time. Bringing a new team member in, you're not briefing them on what's gone on before. You're actually giving them access to the whole thread from the beginning of the project to the time that they entered it. And the big thing is it stops this mail trail that is a pain in the butt. And as we've heard, emails dying. This is the new way of communicating. I flicked through that, I think. Mobility. Again, one of the key components of what UC's delivered. So if you think 5 years ago, the revolutionary thing about unified communication was when your desk phone rang, we could twin that call to another number, your mobile number. The proliferation of Wi-Fi has meant that we can communicate across wireless infrastructure just about everywhere. So the ability to give people a single reachable point of contact but find you where you are at that given moment in time is absolutely crucial to, firstly, a mobility strategy, but secondly, for the whole delivery of the unified communication situation. Hot desking is something we've been doing for years, but again, it's becoming more and more prevalent because as people deploy this unified communication, either nationally or internationally, it means you have complete mobility or locality. So if you look at EOH, they're probably up to 100 different companies now, roughly, I guess, something like that, maybe more. 500, okay. So it's like, so 500 companies with a unified network across those. It means that Rikus going into the Cape Town office where he might not have a desk, probably does not, but he resides in Cape Town, could log into his phone there and he will be seen as being in the office. So when a call comes into his Midrand office, the switchboard operator, by transferring it to his extension, will find him in his current location. And as he moves around the country, that communication link will be maintained. I think business continuity is another key thing. So this ability to work from anywhere means that no organization is absolutely reliant on a single brick and mortar. So it could be that there's DR services in the cloud, it could be that the solution is completely cloud-based, but it means that there's absolutely no single point of failure when it comes to a particular location being under threat. So the work from anywhere is key. So single number reach, dynamic status, teleworking is something we talk about, which is remote working. So Rikus was talking about the contact center. I'll touch that in a bit. But again, more and more, the workforce needs to be distributed. So if you think in a contact center environment, if you were providing a service, let's say a medical service, you could have certain subject matter experts who could help in certain medical conditions. The likelihood of getting them to converge into a single location at any one time is very close to zero. But if you could have those people as part of that contact center, manage them in exactly the same way you would manage any agent, but from a location of their choice, it means you can attract the right people, number one, you'll maintain those people, and it's somewhere that they'll want to stay. Rick has touched on API integration. So in my mind, one of the biggest drivers of UC and one of the key deliverables of UC is it's completely, it's not useless, but it's certainly you're not getting full value on it if you deployed a UC solution and you don't integrate it into the back office. So I'm sure a number of you in the room have been through customization integration projects that can be costly, can be very time-consuming, and take too long to deliver. Cloud-based services, the likes of Amazon, Zapier, and others, are providing off-the-shelf APIs that allow us to achieve integration between the unified communication environment and back-office environments at the drop of a hat. So that speeds up the delivery process of the project, number one, but it also allows for the realization that the big data and whatever's sitting in the back-office applications are completely integrated with the communication environment. So let's just have a quick look at who's using UC today. And what you'll see from this slide is finance industry, it's highly adopted, business services, retail, less so, et cetera, et cetera. So without going into a whole lot of detail on this, it's giving you a view on where the adoption rate is today and how we would foresee it going forward. Importantly, the point I've spoken to previously is that the adoption tends to be segmented within organizations today. So it tends to be a percentage of the organization is using the technology. Of course, the objective has to be to proliferate it throughout the organization. And that's really what this mobile and just the change of the workforce and the mentality of how we work will drive that adoption. There's absolutely no doubt. So over time, we're going to see scenarios where we'll reach 75% plus from an adoption ratio perspective. And I would expect that to be in the next 2 to 3 years. A couple of other interesting stats off this slide. So with this mobility piece, you would expect the death of the desk phone. And over the last couple of years, well, let's go back 3-4 years, people were firstly assuming that the desk phone would be replaced by a soft phone. That was even before your mobile device was truly a soft phone. And today, we can do all of those things. So soft phones are there, but we still see desk phones being deployed very significantly. So in the last 2 years, the deployment of desk phones has actually ticked up on a worldwide basis. Part of that is because the functionality of the desk phone is starting to mirror the mobile phone, as Rikus alluded to earlier. So with a scenario where you can twin or Bluetooth connect your mobile phone with your desk phone, it's starting to look and feel like that. The user interface is very much like a mobile device would be. Your handset, you could receive a call on your mobile phone, but use the handset of your desk phone as the device as your listening device. And it's amazing how much more comfortable a desk phone handset is than the mobile phone if you're spending hours and hours on the phone. So these are some of the innovations that are giving the desk technology, if you like, or the desk phone technology a new lease of life. And then soft phones, we're seeing them more and more. I think we'll see a decrease in portable phones. If you think that people over the years have adopted DECT as a technology or maybe a portable wireless handset, and that was the way of giving key staff members or logistics people mobility. Today we can get a smartphone for 1,000 Rand, put an application on it, it's your mobile device. And even if that was being used in a job function where that person might not own that kind of device, the company could give them a device without a SIM card, and it's way, way cheaper than actually deploying bespoke devices. So let's just have a quick look at the drivers. So we're talking OpEx, and I think Ed spoke to an interesting point earlier. You know, cost reduction is all in any organization, no matter how big or small. Managing expenses is a key component of what you're trying to achieve. That's for absolute sure. But is it the only driver? I'm buying this technology because I want to save costs. More and more, I think it's part of the puzzle, but it's not the complete puzzle. Driving the business to the next generation and realizing this, this digital transformation is probably way more key than that. We also speak about the infrastructure investment. So clearly, all of these services require some underlying foundation that is essential to be able to deliver those. And I'll touch on that in a second. Justifying costs can be, so if we look at the barriers, one is the costs. And how do we do that justification? And what I'm going to wrap up on here in a few slides' time is a roadmap of how you would go about conceiving a project and getting it to the end. And obviously, the key thing about the justification is understanding the total cost of ownership and being able to put a business case together that you can convince management or the board that this business case actually has its merits. Okay? I'm going to just jump over that slide because I think we've covered that. So I just want to touch on the contact center experience a bit. Now, so some people see contact centers as a completely different thing. But if you think of a digital transformation, we're speaking about unified communication. The customer experience is key to this. And those, whether you're in the IT services business, whether you're in a consumer-orientated business like selling tickets, for example, for concerts, the way people interact with you is key to the business. So if the phone doesn't get answered, that booking doesn't happen, your competitors got that booking. If an email's not answered, same thing. So the contact centers move from being a single source, which is really voice-based, to what we would call multi-channel. So what that means is any interaction could be handled in exactly the same way as you handle a voice call. So what does a contact center do? It manages when the interaction came in and how quickly people responded to it, and possibly measures if it had to get escalated because the first caller, the first line could not resolve it, it gets escalated up the chain, then it'll manage that escalation too. So whereas today we know voice, of course, and we have customers, many customers using email as a means of interaction, the next gen is to bring all the social media feeds into that, and this is deliverable today. And one of the key ones for our market is WhatsApp. So South Africa has the biggest proliferation of WhatsApp users in the world. And so for people talking to the Generation X and the millennials, these people would like to use WhatsApp to book their concert tickets. So it's in exactly the same way as they'd use a voice call. The other key thing is the contact center is moving from multi-channel to what we call omni-channel. And what that essentially means is that organizations want to take any interaction that a customer has had with them across any medium and be able to pull that data. So instead of looking at those feeds in segmented ways, you want to bring it together in a set of data that characterizes exactly how you as an organization have interacted with that particular user or customer. And so that is a big thing and key. Of course, the contact center goes way beyond a first line. So an organization who has this digital transformation waxed will be encompassing all aspects of their organization into this interaction model. So this is a scenario where a customer makes a contact, there's a CRM lookup, so you have the business process integration in place where we're popping screens or providing information. Using the locality mechanisms of these smart devices, you can pinpoint where the nearest technician is to get them on site, feedback to the customer and keep them updated, escalate to a technical consultant or expert, so that's an escalation route, and then visually collaborate from this technical expert who is centralized to help the on-site smart hands, if I can term it that, resolve the problem. And this whole soup to nuts interaction would be measured by the contact center, and you could go to school on it later to see how efficient or not that may be. Lastly, workforce optimization. Again, a big term. It could be called workforce management, workforce optimization. It's all about being able to analyze how customer interactions go. If you were hearing certain keywords that were being spoken in interaction between an agent and a customer, intercede at the supervisor level to try and calm things down. Maybe it's the tone of voice that's gone up. Maybe there's certain keywords that are being used, blasphemy, whatever the case is. So you're looking at those sort of interactions to make immediate decisions and immediately address things. And then, of course, one of the key things for any organization is having an optimized workforce. So too many people means you're spending too much money. Too little people means the customer experience is probably being affected. Okay, so living in a two-speed world, which is the theme of this conference, is about understanding where you are today and where you'd like to be tomorrow, but understanding that very few of you will be starting with a greenfield piece of paper. So you have legacy systems, you have legacy deployments across the board, and it's how do we marry the old with the new. And it's a subject that is very specific to each, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It's dependent on the environment you have, number one, and number two, the environment you would like to go to. But the point of this slide and the message from this conference is there's a deep understanding within our community on how to get customers from A to B. And it's a matter of getting that migration path set up with each of you individually to understand how we integrate with the existing today, and then understand that the project takes time to roll out. So it's not just a plug and replace and a slapdash thing. It's got to be planned properly, and eventually the legacy is withdrawn. So the last slide is really to give you a roadmap. So Ed's mentioned it, Rikus has mentioned it. What's the key about any IT project? It's getting your business requirements defined. If the business requirements aren't clear, there's no way of measuring whether this project was successful or not. So business process, the business requirement is key, and I think Ed made the point that it has to be driven from the top down. So this isn't the IT manager coming up with a bright idea and selling it to the board. The board needs to embrace it too, and it needs to be embraced through the whole organization. One of the biggest challenges I think organizations have out there is deploying technology and then getting the business to possibly change or tweak the business to allow it to use the technology in its most optimum way. We often deploy technology and then just expect it to fix business problems. But if there's not buy-in from the business that they need to adapt and to best use the technology, then you're failing before you start. So that all needs to be part of that business case. I've spoken about how some people would need to use the technology different to others. So again, it's important to understand who's going to get all the bells and whistles and who's just going to get some of the lower level functionality but still be part of this broader UC community. So it's getting the right fit for the right type of job function. Of course, we come to the costs. I've mentioned the engineering, the infrastructure. Without a foundation, you can't even start. So if you build a house on sand, it will fall down. It's a given. It's just a matter of time when. This is the same story. You need the network infrastructure, LAN, WAN, all of those type of things, server infrastructure, be them outsourced, cloud-based, or be them on-site, premise-based, managed by internal IT. All of those boxes need to be ticked before you can deliver on this. The definition of what business process integration you need, so what application integration is required to really deliver on this, is absolutely key. And then the training. So often we deploy technology and just expect people to adopt it without giving the right training to the right level of user to make sure that they're comfortable with the technology. They're not going to adopt it, and it will be an absolute failure as far as a project adoption point of view. So training is absolutely key to this. I think internal costs are key too. So often there are scenarios where a vendor is brought in from outside to deliver a project, but IT internal hasn't bought into it. So any project group needs to be a mix of the chosen vendor plus the internal process people, be it project management, be it IT, to bring these all together and work as a collaborative team as opposed to an us and them approach. I've spoken about the premise versus cloud. This is not a religious debate. I think, and we'll probably maybe discuss some of this in the Q&A, but premise still very much there and very, very much part of our lives, and the statistics from the analysts show that. But there is this move to the cloud. We have the enablement to be able to do that. It's what makes sense for an organization like yourselves at any given moment in time. The key on the strategy is that if cloud does become part of the process, is what is the best path to the cloud, what's the timing on it, and how do you get there? So that tends to run into the financial debate, OpEx versus CapEx. So of course, CapEx has been the norm, but in the industry, even for premise-based solutions, for many years we've done rental schemes, so that is an OpEx model in its own right. The difference between going into the cloud is that's a consumption-based model, and probably makes sense for some businesses, doesn't for others. So it's not a right or a wrong list. It's understanding what both of these things can do, both from a premise cloud point of view as well as the OpEx versus CapEx. An organization who has a 10-year horizon on technology adoption, which frankly is probably too long, but let's say they do that. If you're going to pay OpEx for 10 years, you're going to pay triple what you would have paid if you just bought it outright. But if your adoption model is 3 years, possibly makes sense to do that. The key thing then is choosing the right vendor or manufacturer and choosing the right local partner. And what we've seen in the last 15 years is a massive consolidation of the business communication industry. So there's a number of names that used to be the major players in this space when I started Mitel 15 years ago, who are really not even, they either don't look the same anymore or they just don't exist. So we feel that the industry is consolidating into literally a handful of players, and choosing one who has the financial stability and the roadmap to continue growing this, because it doesn't stop here. We're at the starting point, and more innovation is going to come through. And then you need a local partner who can deliver on this. All of the project-based stuff, rollout plans, all of those things I think are really key. Defining the business process integration. So what does that project mean? Are we using these standard APIs that I've spoken about, or are we going into a more customized process? And again, that's business process, that's business requirement driven, but that dictates what needs to be done, and that would dictate how complex that would be. And then moving into the services plan. So who's going to maintain this afterwards? I think one of the attractions of cloud solutions is that people see it as a managed service. It takes the pressure off me as internal IT, and this is someone else's problem. Well, we could do the same for a premise-based solution as a managed service, if that was the requirement. But what's key is getting the definition of what the organization sees as their responsibility and what the vendor is going to deliver from the service delivery side of things. And lastly, how many times do we deliver on a project and actually benchmark it? So there's a TCO, there was a business plan drawn up, it was put in front of the board and agreed, but Do we ever go back 2 years later and understand whether that business plan fulfilled, whether the project fulfilled the business plan? So that benchmarking and verification to me is absolutely key. So I guess the question is, where are you in this digital transformation? It's a pool you have to dive into. You've got to dive into it with a plan. And organizations that do not embrace it and grasp it and move forward are probably not going to be with us for much longer. Thank you very much, guys.